Except within a few seconds, I hear this boom. It was like an explosion, but it was different than that. It was as though a piece of furniture had been lifted and pushed onto the floor. It was as loud as a nightstand or even a four-drawer dresser falling onto the ground. And I opened my eyes immediately, trying to make sense of that noise and see what had happened. A few years ago, I was feeling stuck. I was not happy in any aspect of my life. I was not happy professionally. My social life was very poor and limited. I had been seeing someone for a couple of years, but I had no intention of making it serious. I hadn't even presented him to my family. I didn't see any future in the relationship. I wasn't crazy about him, but at the same time, we did have some good moments together. And I felt guilty for not loving him, despite being provided with so much from him. He would give me so much attention. He cared for me. He wanted to build a life with me. He was respectful and nurturing, but deep inside, I knew I was just holding on to that guy until someone better came along. I wasn't happy at work, but it wasn't just a matter of changing jobs. I wasn't happy with my career altogether. I wanted to do something different, but I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. I wasn't happy with where I lived, meaning the actual apartment I was renting and also the city I was living in. I had this feeling that nothing would ever get any better than that in that town. But I couldn't just change cities. I couldn't just leave everything behind and try my luck in a new city where I knew nobody and where I had no support system. So I knew I had to change apartments because it needed some major renovations and the landlord was not willing to do it. Also, I didn't have the greatest neighbors, but every time I would search for rentals, I would be crushed by how much the cost of living had raised everywhere. Renting got expensive, a huge change compared to 2 or 3 years prior to that. Maybe I should buy something, I thought. But that was even less realistic because if I could barely afford rent, of course, I wouldn't be able to afford a mortgage and all the responsibilities that came with it. So every change that I needed to make in my life required other changes. I wanted to move out from my apartment, but I would need a higher income to afford a better place or any place. And to have a higher income, I would need not just a different job, but a different career altogether. And to build a different career, I would need education. And I just didn't have the money nor the time to go back to school. Also, I was already in my late 30s. I didn't feel like spending most of my days with teenagers that just got out of high school. So I just felt so hopeless, a complete failure, living such a meaningless life. How did I reach this point? How did I manage to fail every aspect of my life? At what moment did everything start falling apart? I had been living in a comfort zone for so long, but that comfort zone was not comfortable anymore. So I knew I had to make changes, but I felt so overwhelmed that I was paralyzed. I didn't know where to begin. And I had these recurring dreams. At least once a week, I would have the same dream. I would dream about myself at the age of 10 years old. And I was always drawing and painting. And I remembered I did like to draw and paint when I was 10. And I was actually good at it. And then the more I had those dreams, the more I remembered those days, that time of my life. And I realized that there was this activity through which I expressed myself so well, and I simply stopped. I have no recollection of why I stopped drawing. Just one day, I didn't do it anymore. This went on for about 2 years, and I was getting kind of tired of having the same dream over and over again. And I thought I had already understood what that meant, when in fact I was just accessing the very surface of what it meant. So one day I wake up in the middle of the night and I just stay there looking around in bed, trying to go back to sleep. There's nothing going on, so I close my eyes, waiting to fall asleep again. Except within a few seconds, I hear this boom. It was like an explosion, but it was different than that. It was as though a piece of furniture had been lifted and pushed onto the floor. It was as loud as a nightstand or even a 4-drawer dresser falling onto the ground. And I opened my eyes immediately, trying to make sense of that noise and see what had happened. And I looked around and everything in the room was in its place. I thought maybe it came from another apartment in the building, but I knew it had happened right there. It was so loud. It happened right beside me, as if my bedside table had just fallen off, but it was there, perfectly placed. No one had touched it. And for a second I thought, okay, maybe I fell asleep and it was just a dream. I thought I was awake, but I wasn't. And the moment that thought crosses my mind, the person I was with was lying right next to me, and he woke up and asked me, "What happened?" And I said, "Did you also hear that?" And he said, "Of course. What did you drop? What happened? What was that noise?" And right there, I knew that noise had in fact happened, that it wasn't a dream, and it was in our room. And I just lie there, and it occurred to me very clearly that someone or something was trying to tell me to wake up. It was an intuition that I had. The incident was telling me, wake up, as if there was someone or something that knew what I was going through and was alerting me to take action. They were not literally telling me to wake up, but to take actions, make changes, make the decisions that I needed to make to have a different life. Start by something. One step at a time, just start. It was imperative that I woke up. I couldn't live like that anymore. So I understood the message very clearly, and that gave me the strength I needed to stop walking in circles, landing on U-turns, and finally do things differently. And then I remembered why I had stopped painting. At the age of 10, I had painted on canvas, and I was so proud of it that I took it to school to show it to my favorite teacher. And she was so proud of my work that she asked me to pass the canvas around so everyone in the classroom could see it. And so I did, until I turned around and I saw some kids making fun of my work, giggling and saying how ugly my painting was. And that image stayed with me for a long time, and that was the exact moment I stopped painting. And when I accessed that memory, I burst into tears. And there I was, a woman in her late 30s, crying like a 10-year-old over something that happened in third grade. And I remember getting home from school that day, and I was embarrassed to tell my parents what had happened, because I just assumed that they felt the same about my work. I just assumed that it was really bad and that they also hated it. And I don't remember crying about it. I just remember being embarrassed for realizing that I was such a failure, that I had no talent, and that any compliment that I had ever gotten were just lies. And I never painted again. And that feeling of failure, of rejection and self-doubt lingered into my adulthood. I had been living in survival mode up until that point because I learned I wasn't worthy. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't entitled to be good at something. A few weeks went by and I decided to join a local art school and start painting classes. And right off the bat, I was making so much progress. That weekly class was the very moment I longed for all week. And for the first time, I was myself. I was happy. It just felt so right. Then a 2-hour class per week was not enough. And I took on another course and another. I made friends, people I had a lot of common interests with. About 6 months went by and I found a new apartment. It was so much better than the one I was living in, but it was a lot more expensive. And I remember signing the contract with my hand shaking, not certain if I was doing the right thing. I knew I wanted to live there, but I also knew I could barely afford it. So I get in my car holding my new lease, thinking, I hope I'm not in trouble for this. And I get a call from the art studio saying that one of my paintings had been sold. I never thought I could actually sell one of my paintings. I did it because it made me feel good and relaxed, but I never intended to sell them or live off of them. And believe it or not, the money I was getting for that painting would cover the difference of my new rental. So I started an online business where I showcased all my paintings on social media, and people actually liked it. I've sold a few paintings for a considerable amount of money. And the person I was seeing, I had finally gotten the courage to tell them that I was not interested anymore. That relationship was just holding both of us back. And it was only after I stopped seeing them that I realized how toxic that relationship was. I always saw him as nurturing and caring, but in reality, he was mean and manipulative. I don't know who or what told me to wake up that night, but it was only after that incident that I was able to make all the changes that I needed. And some changes just came naturally. All they needed was for me to take the first step.